Hi friends, thank you so much for being here. I'm August and this is Cozy Rosy Reads' first ever giant, massive thrift haul. I have accumulated quite a few books. Some have been borrowed, book sales, thrift stores, and then from my local indie bookstore. And these have been accumulated since January. Obviously there are a lot of books here, but I wanted to share them with you because I'm really jazzed about them. And there's some really cool ones in here that I'm so excited to get my little grubby little hands on. So I'll just tell you a little bit about the plot, where I found them, what intrigued me about them, and all that fun stuff. So let's get into it. I think on this channel I'd like to do thrift store hauls pretty regularly, but then do like a really big massive one like once every 3 months, because then it's just like here's everything. Linked below I will add one of my vlogs where I actually did showcase the books that I found at a little free library and more of like an antique estate sale haul that I had that I threw into that. So those books that I found there are not included in here, so if you want to see even more juicy stuff, go ahead and check out that vlog. So keep an eye out for that. New videos are out every Tuesday and Thursday, so subscribe, like, stay tuned. We're talking about so many awesome bookish things here. The first book I want to tell you about is one that I actually just started reading, and I'm so excited about it because it's so cool and I feel like it's extremely underrated despite the author being incredibly famous and a really big historical figure, and that is Flower Fables by Louisa May Alcott. Also, I apologize if you hear squeaking in the background. I don't know if my camera's picking it up, but there is something outside that is squeaking. I'm like, is it a truck? So I apologize. That's really obnoxious. But anyway, this is so cute. This is a tiny little copy. This was actually Louisa May Alcott's first book that she ever published, and she is the author of Little Women, which I have yet to read, maybe one day, but I am absolutely in love with this. This is one of the cutest books I think I've ever dipped into, and it would be great for all ages. If you were into fairies, flowers, secret gardens, cottagecore, this book is definitely for you. It literally follows these little fairies and these little adventures. They describe how they use little toadstool mushrooms as umbrellas, and it's just really divine and cute, and I think it'd be great to read aloud to little ones. I think it's great for us older people who loved fairies and gardens growing up. It is just so calming and quaint and just full of nature, and it's absolutely beautiful. I read the first 2 chapters of this and I'm absolutely loving it. I'm slowly making my way through of reading like a chapter every few days, but it basically follows this little group of fairies who are kind of ending the day, and they decide to go around in a circle and tell about all the adventures and things that they learned throughout the day. So it just bounces between each little fairy and the little adventures and stories they went on. So wholesome, so cute, highly recommend. I think this is some of Louisa May Alcott's work that should definitely be talked about more. I really have never heard of this. This book is really tricky to find. I tried to find it on used websites or like places where I could buy thrifted used books, but I feel like there aren't a whole lot of like used copies in circulation. I could be very wrong, but like the places I was looking didn't have them, so I did have to buy this online, but it was $5. So and it's a very like indie publisher. The quality is not great, but whatever. So just so you know, that is where I got this one. This next book, I can 100,000% say that BookTube made me buy it. I saw a used copy at my local indie bookstore while I was there, and I was like, should I get it? Should I not? And I didn't. So next time I went there, I was like, okay, if it's still there, I'll get it. And it was meant to be, but I'm also excited but also terrified to get into this one, and that is because it is A Little Life by Hanya Yanighara. If you haven't heard of this book, I honestly don't know what to say. So many booktubers have made vlogs of themselves reading this book, and it just completely devastates people. It's one of those books that has been kind of described as trauma porn, which again, not cool. Like, people are very explicit in saying that this has every trigger and content warning imaginable, so like please be very careful in going into it. I'm not recommending it by any means because I have no idea what's in here. All I know is that it follows 4 young men and their lives together, their friendship and their independent lives, and how they've grown through the years. But it just just includes every kind of content and trigger warning possible. And I've heard that this is kind of like, yeah, it's torture. You kind of start the book with falling in love with the characters, and then the rest of the book is just how can we just make the reader emotional about this? How can we completely devastate them? So it is a really big book. The content is going to be very difficult to read, but at the same time, I've just been so curious to see how my emotional reaction would be, because I have yet to read a book where I've cried. I've teared up, but I've never cried over a book or characters. I haven't been hit in that way. I've definitely felt emotions, but never full-on waterworks. So I'm really curious if this will do it, but I'm also extremely nervous to get into it. But again, 100% BookTube made me buy it, and I found this copy used for $6, so that's pretty good. This next book I also found used at my local indie, and it almost made me cry when I saw it because it was such a blast from the past. One of my favorite all-time childhood books, and I had recently gotten rid of it over the past like 5 years. I passed it on to somebody else, and then just recently I started thinking about it and wishing I had a copy because it's a book that I would have loved to revisit, and that is The Anybodies by N.E. Buddy. This is a like middle grade YA story about a young girl named Fern who finds out one day that she was swapped at birth, and she really is a part of this really extraordinarily quirky family, and she spends the summer with them, and there's like fairies and adventures and all of these little quirky things. Very magical realism, and I just remember loving it as a kid, like geeking out about this book. So I was so excited to find a copy, and I am really looking forward to diving into this and kind of almost further understanding the books that have shaped me as a reader, like what I enjoy now, because I'm such a fan of magical realism and really quaint, calming, quirky kind of books. So I am so excited to reread this one, so happy I found a used copy, and it has definitely been very well loved, and that makes me really happy. Wow, okay, I did decide to go in alphabetical order here, and next is another childhood favorite that I found used on Facebook Marketplace, which was awesome. I just recently started looking on Facebook Marketplace for some books and got it shipped to my house really, really quickly, and that is Aquamarine by Alice Hoffman. First off, I knew about Aquamarine because of the movie. I mean, JoJo, Sarah Paxton, Emma Roberts, yes. So when I found out it was a book when I was younger, I read it, and I remember being really disappointed by the book because I loved the movie so much and I was comparing it. But now that I'm older, I had no idea Alice Hoffman wrote this book. I had no idea. I have read several of Alice Hoffman's books, including Practical Magic, Here on Earth, and absolutely love her writing style, so it just blew me away that she wrote this like YA middle grade story that follows two teenage girls and how they befriend a mermaid over the summer and try to help her find love. I'm really excited to read this again now, knowing that Alice Hoffman wrote it, and also trying not to compare it to the movie because the movie is just like so much summer, light, fluffy fun. So yeah, that's another one. Aquamarine, super tiny. A little blast from the past. This would be a great little summer beach read. This next book I found at my local indie bookstore again in their $1 book pile, and I was so geeked about it. And that is Atlantis by Jeffrey Ashe. This is a absolutely stunning book that chronicles the story and history of Atlantis, and with these gorgeous illustrations. It's just a very accessible kind of history text filled with artwork and historical figures. I know absolutely nothing about Atlantis, but it's always been a topic that's really intrigued me. I kind of wish I knew a little bit more kind of going into this book, but I think this is going to be a fantastic starting point to understand the cultural and historical context of Atlantis. And the cover reads, "Lost lands and ancient philosophy meet in Atlantis, where Plato began the search for our origins." I'm really excited for this one. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and I just love the mixed media in here as well. It's just so accessible, colorful, really well designed, and just stunning. Very stunning. Alright, moving on. I did buy this next book full price from my local indie bookstore. Support local independent bookstores, friends. And that's just because I could not find a used copy anywhere because it is still hyped. People still want to read it, and I want to read it because I want to know what I'm missing. Okay, here we go. That is Call Me By Your Name by André Aciman. This story follows a young boy who falls into a relationship with a slightly older man maybe in his like early 20s. If you've seen the movie, very beautiful. And I've just been really curious about this book because I've heard so many people rave about the writing style and the storytelling. And I am just really looking forward to reading this one, kind of diving into it firsthand for myself so I can formulate my own opinions on it. Because comparing a book to a movie, like I can say like, oh, I love the Call Me By Your Name story from the movie, but I really want to fully understand my thoughts on it and express them a little bit better. This one's kind of like a little bit of a cult classic, so I would love to kind of formulate my thoughts on it and form an opinion. I'm really looking forward to reading this one. This next book has been on my birthday wish list, my Christmas wish list, my Goodreads want to read list for so long, and I have yet to receive a copy. So I don't know how this happened, but again, local indie bookstore, I went in and this was just sitting there in the used book section looking so divine, looking so pristine. I dropped everything and was like squealing in my head and doing a little dance. And that is Creatures by Crissy Van Meter. Oh my gosh, can we talk about this cover? Can we talk about this cover? I have so many expectations for this book, which is a little frightening for me, but when I read the concept of this book and the plot, I just fell in love with it already. It seems like the perfect book for me. It follows this woman who, on the day that she's supposed to get married, her husband or groom-to-be is missing at sea, and at the same time a dead whale has washed up on the beach of this small town that they live in. And it just dives into love, loss, mortality, poetry, like all of these topics that I feel like are just, I love sea, I love creatures, I love relationships, and this poetic language that seems to be just on the first page. I'm so excited. This seems like it has absolutely everything that I want and love and look for in a book. I have really high hopes. I really do think this is a 5-star prediction favorite book of all time. Hopefully I'm not raising the bar too high with my expectations. I have already decided that next month, April, is my birthday month, and since I do random generated TBRs, I never know what I'm gonna read until I do my like generator wheel, and right now it's all based on colors, the front color covers of books. So I thought in April I'm going to ditch the generated TBRs and read what I want. So I get to just pick all the books that I've been wanting to read and get to, so this is definitely going to be on there. So follow along, stay tuned, because I will be doing a birthday month TBR, sharing all the books that I personally want to read in my birthday month. And then of course follow for the wrap up to see my actual thoughts on it. But I am so geeked about this one. I'm so jazzed about it, and I can't wait to dive into this one. It's like I'm saving it for a special occasion because I really have such high hopes for it. Next is a book that I found at a library book sale, and they were having a 25-cent sale, and my partner and I went, and we ended up leaving with I think a total of like 13 books or something. It was great, and I'm really intrigued with this one because it is a graphic novel, and that is the Harlem Hellfighters, written by Max Brooks, who also wrote World War Z. And then it's illustrated by Cannon White, whose art style just seems, just looking at it, you can tell this is going to be a gory story, you can tell this is going to be a really intense story. But this book follows the Harlem Hellfighters, which was a troop during World War I made up entirely of Black soldiers. I am so excited to get into this because it is like a historical fiction and graphic novel form. I don't know what else to say about it other than I don't really know if there's a specific plot, but I'm sure we're going to be introduced to characters and really uncomfortable scenarios in here, and war scenes and discussions about war, and especially from the perspective of Black soldiers and the discrimination despite being a soldier and being a patriot. I think it's going to be a very fascinating and enthralling read, so I'm really looking forward to this one, and I'm really happy that I was able to find a graphic novel at a used library book sale as well. I feel like that's something that I don't typically see and is definitely an adult graphic novel, which I'm really looking forward to diving into. Next is another book found at that 25-cent library book sale, and this one intrigued me so much because it seems like it has that kind of vibe. I don't know if there's a specific genre keyword for this type of book, but like books like The Night Circus or Church of Marvels, where it takes place in kind of like the dirty late 1800s, early 1900s industrial revolution, but with like circus tents and like gothic macabre elements of almost like magical realism, fascinations with like apothecaries and small shops and like tinctures and stuff. You know what I'm talking about? Like that specific genre where there's just like books that have that kind of like texture and feel. Does that make sense? If you know what I'm talking about, let me know, and let me know if there's like a word for it, because I just want to call it like gross dark circus or like kind of gothic kind of vibes. I don't know. That is The Hourglass Factory by Lucy Ribchester. When I looked this up on Goodreads, it really did not have a lot of people who've read it, which I thought was really interesting. It came out in like 2015, I believe, but in the Goodreads description it says soon to be a full feature film with like Meryl Streep, and I was like, what? So I looked it up and I couldn't find anything online about this. I'm like, was there even an announcement? Did they just make that up? I don't know. Maybe it's in the works and it's low-key. I honestly don't know what the plot is. Let's take a peek. London, 1912. The suffragette movement is reaching a fever pitch, and Inspector Frederick Primrose is hunting a murderer on his own beat. Across town, Fleet Street reporter is chasing an interview with trapeze artist Ebony Diamond. Fascinated by the tightly laced acrobat, follows her to a corset shop that seems to be hiding secrets of its own. And then it just kind of goes into this stuff, and there's a mysterious hourglass factory. It is a pretty thick book. It just seems like so much fun. This is a book that I think the ambience pulled me in more than the story itself, which, I mean, I'm just a big sucker for ambience anyway. Like, just give me a good setting, give me a good mood where I can really like sink my teeth into with all of its senses. I'm really looking forward to this one. I think this would be a really fun kind of like fall, autumn, October read, just because it does remind me a little bit of like The Night Circus and The Church of Marvels, which was a really wonderful read as well. This next book, I kind of went to my parents' house one day and was looking at all of their bookshelves and was like, can I borrow this? And then I borrow that? And it's just a lot of classic literature that I feel like I need to read it sometime soon in my lifetime. And that is, of course, If Beale Street Could Talk by James Baldwin. This is such a cute little copy. It's so darling. It's so tiny. I read Giovanni's Room in January. Absolutely loved it. I loved it. I was astonished that I had never read James Baldwin before. I was astonished that I was intimidated going into James Baldwin because I thought the writing style would be inaccessible to me. I don't know why. Maybe that's just because like kind of classics intimidate me for sure. But now that I've dived into them, I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to read these. They're not as scary as I thought they would. So I'm really excited to get into If Beale Street Could Talk. This is one that has just been talked about so much, has so much context and historical value. So I'm really, really looking forward to reading another James Baldwin very soon. This next book I also found used at my local indie bookstore, and I was baffled that I'd never heard of this book before or this historical figure, and that is Oludo Equiano's The Interesting Narrative and Other Writings. So Oluda was a slave to a very notorious British, I believe he was a slave to an officer in the British Navy, and then he was able to purchase his freedom. And when he was a free man, he actually traveled to Central America and was a plantation like overseer. And from there he kind of realized like, oh my gosh, this is really messed up. Why am I doing that? He became a really big leading figure in the anti-slavery movement and wrote these incredible diaries and details of his experience as a slave, being kidnapped in Africa and then being made a slave to this Navy British figure. I'm definitely intimidated to read this just because of, one, obviously, the dense and horrifying topic and discussion of slavery from a first-hand account, but also two, I did start reading the first few pages and the language is very intimidating. I feel like this is going to be a very dense book. It's going to take me a long time to read and understand and really get as much out of it as I possibly can. So it's definitely an intimidating text, but I think it's super, super important. Very disappointed in kind of like the education system and maybe the literary world that I never heard of this man and his incredible narrative and stories, and the fact that it's so densely detailed in here. Like everything is in here. A little portrait and illustration and these original writings of when it was published. This is just amazing to me, and he was able to purchase his freedom in 1766. So like I can't wrap my mind around the cruelty of humanity and wrap my mind around that there are texts that have been so well preserved and were able to be published and we can read them now in the year of 2021. That's mind-blowing to me. So that is the interesting narrative and other writings. Next is another book taken from my parents' shelves. This is a definitely very aesthetically pleasing book that I'm very excited to get into, and that is A Lust for Life by Irving Stone. This copy is so stunning. I don't know if it ever had a dust jacket, but like, why would it? Because the entire book is covered with a painting by Van Gogh. So this book is a historical fiction about Van Gogh's life. And throughout it are his actual paintings. These pages are so thin and flimsy, but we have all of these his etchings and illustrations are in here just absolutely throughout. I would say it's almost like once every like few pages. And oh my gosh, it's beautiful. But yeah, it has dialogue, all of this historical context of Van Gogh's life, but in this fictional story or passing of his time, or I'm not quite sure if it follows just one specific year or a whole period of his life, or I have no idea. But I am very excited to get into this one, especially just because I love that the paintings and drawings are included in here. I think it's a beautiful collection, and I'm really excited about it. This next one I found at the 25-cent library book sale. I was so excited to find it because it is a classic. I have recently, when I go thrifting or anywhere, I've just been keeping my eyeballs open for classic pieces of literature because one, I have not read enough, two, I don't own very many classics, and I think it's very wise to, when you see one for hella cheap, like just get it, even if I don't end up reading it in my lifetime. Maybe I can pass it on to someone else, but anyway, this one is Madame Bovary by Gustave Flaubert. Gustave Flaubert? I gotta stop saying it. First off, I love this edition. I love this. I like the cover. And I like that it's a paperback. Madame Bovary is just a book that you hear about all the time, at least for me, but I have no idea what it's about. I have no idea what it follows or what it talks about. It's just one of those ubiquitous texts that you hear referred to all the time, and you're like, oh yeah, I should read about it, but it's never at the forefront of my mind when I think of classics, ever. At least for me personally. It's basically about this young woman and her romantic tales and how it just kind of like, I believe it like kind of gets her in trouble and she's kind of ostracized from society for just living this like passionate romantic life. So I'm curious to read it. Honestly, when it comes to men writing about young women, I have issues with it. I have a lot of issues with it, but I would still give this a chance. It's a pretty dense book. Who knows if I'll enjoy it? Will I get to it soon? Probably not, but at least I have a copy of it, and a gorgeous one at that. Okay friends, I just realized that when the wind comes, that's when the squeaking starts. So right now I think we're okay, but if a gust comes, we're in trouble. I think it's like a squeaky, got a big truck now. And there's the wind. Oh, I hate it. Oh, I'm so sorry friends. It's irking me, and if you can hear it, I'm so sorry. Now I got this motorcycle dude just like swerving on his bike. Like, my neighborhood is just, it's bikers. It's all bikers and trucks. Okay, the next two books I'll be chatting with you all about are from the 25-cent library book sale. Good finds, super jazzed about them. This next one is so interesting to me, and it is Mother Lunge by, oh, I'm covering it, Kirsten Scott. I could not get the sticker off, please ignore, it's so ugly, but this is such a gorgeous piece of literary fiction, and it follows relationships between mothers and daughters. It literally opens, I believe, with the mother telling her daughter how she lost her virginity. So it talks about sexuality, it talks about relationships, romances, teenagehood, and just kind of growing up. And I absolutely love stories about femininity and kind of growing into that position, especially from a mother-daughter perspective, but it is just done so beautifully. I got really excited and started reading the first like chapter of it. I love it. I love the writing style. I'm definitely saving this one for summertime just because, I don't know, the cover being underwater, it just seems like a really lovely piece to read on the beach or in the hot summer sun. I'm not fully sure why I'm getting that vibe from this book, but I'm so excited to dig into it. I do love pieces of literary fiction that just discuss really in-depth topics, but they do it in a way that's still so modern and accessible to everybody. It's so relatable, and even though it's a story that you can't 100% relate to. Now, this next one, I actually am currently reading the first in this duology series, and I am loving it. I am reading the first book over on my Kindle on the Libby app, so thank you, Libby! I love having like free access to library books on a Kindle. It is a game changer. It's so incredible. Please look into Libby if you haven't already. It's such a wonderful resource for ebooks and audiobooks, and I love that books can just so easily be accessible to everybody and anybody with a library card. And that book is Of Love and Evil by Anne Rice. I have yet to read a book by Anne Rice. I have found many copies of her books that I've thrifted or found at little free libraries, and I start reading them, and then I'm like, oh, I like this writing style, I like the vibe, I like where this is going, but then I find out it's like number XYZ in a series, and then I'm like, oh, well, I'm not ready to read this because I want to read it in order. So then I've donated them back because it just doesn't make sense. I tried to get my hands on Interview with a Vampire, which Anne Rice also wrote this Halloween time last year, and unfortunately everybody else wanted to read Interview with a Vampire, so I was not able to get my hands on it. So I'm so excited that I found this copy, and it is large print. I am so happy. I have been loving large print books. It just makes the experience so fast, and even on my Kindle, I set my font size, bump that baby up. Like, you just read so much faster when the text isn't squished together and then you can't find where the start of the next sentence is because they're so compact. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, I'm absolutely loving the first book in this duology series, and it's called Angel Time. And I believe the whole series is called, yep, it's from the duology The Songs of the Seraphim, and I am loving Angel Time. Anne Rice's writing is just impeccable. It's beautiful, it's illustrious, but at the same time, it's so easy to read, and you feel the action, you feel the tension immediately. But this series follows a young man who is an assassin. He kills people for a living, he's a hitman, and he's really dissatisfied with his life. He lives a very isolated life, his family has all passed away, and he is just surrounded by books. His entire life is books and history, and then he gets a call from his anonymous person that he calls the right man, and he goes on these hit jobs, and he hates cruelty, he hates doing what he does, but he still finds this kind of like satisfying beauty out of it. And throughout the whole story so far, I'm only like 20% into that book, but he finds a lot of comfort and safety in going to churches and praying to God even though he doesn't believe in God. So I really love that aspect of spirituality in the sense of like, God is just love. Love is this universal, it's a feeling rather than like the actual, oh no. I lost a word on the tip of my tongue, and now I'm taken aback now. I'm so frazzled. What was the word I'm looking for? Not spiritual, not sacred. It's another S word, I think, about texts. If I think of it later editing August, please put it in here because I'm blanking. I'm blanking so hardcore. But yeah, I love that it discusses religion and spirituality in a way where it's not just specifically about Christianity or Catholicism. It is just about this overarching universal feeling of love and purpose. And the story basically follows this man as he is then introduced to an angel, and the angel tells him, like, just because you're an assassin, like, you still deserve love and you still have a purpose in this life, let me show you. And I don't know how it quite gets from point A, which I just described, to point B, which is then traveling to like 15th century Rome. I don't know, but I love it, and I love the writing style. I love how easy I'm just thrown into the world. The first book, Angel Time, absolutely loving it. Both of these covers are so stunning. I'm not a series reader, and I'm definitely not a fantasy reader, but this is more of like magical realism almost, and really deep discussions about religion and faith and purpose and feeling unconditional love from this angel, from this above being or maker. So I'm really, really enjoying this already. I love that it's just a 2-book series. That's definitely something I can get into. I'm not, like I said, I'm not a series reader, but this is one that I can definitely do. So once I finish reading Angel Time, I'm going to immediately hop into this one of Love and Evil because wow, I'm really liking it. This next one is another one that I bought full price from my local indie bookstore because again, I could not find a copy used anywhere, and if I did, it was very pricey, and it was actually less expensive to purchase it brand new and support my local indie bookstore, and that is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. I mean, do I need to say any more? I think it's so awesome how so many people nowadays, and even booktubers or people who mainly just read like contemporary or fantasy or literary fiction, are now being introduced to classics, and this is one that most people are saying if you want to be introduced to the classics world without being completely like intimidated and terrified of it, this is a really great place to start. And I'm just really, really looking forward to this one. This follows a young man who is quite narcissistic and absolutely loves the way that he looks, and he commissions a portrait to be made of himself and asks like, I hope I never age and I never want to age, and something, it's almost like kind of like a deal with the devil. And so while he never ages, this portrait of himself does, and it reveals his true age, but it's forever on display for everyone to see. And I've heard that it's quite comical. I believe this also has like a gay relationship in it, and it talks about sexuality in a way that late 1800s when this was written was definitely not talked about, not discussed. So I'm very excited to get into this one and understand the cultural hype of this book, the cult classic feeling, that feeling of reading a piece of classic literature, and really formulating my own opinions on it. I think that's the biggest thing I take away from getting into classics now in my reading experience, is so that way I can actually have an opinion on it and understand why this has shaped so much of our literary and cultural world. Yeah, that is The Picture of Dorian Gray. We only have 4 books left, friends. This next book I found, again, from my dad's bookshelves, and I'm very curious about it. I'm also very nervous. I tried to read a book by this author many years ago. I would say like 6 years ago, and I couldn't get into it. I had to put it down, and I kind of like just DNF'd it, did not finish it. That is Queer by William S. Burroughs. William S. Burroughs, yes, I've heard so many things. People say like, oh yeah, I enjoyed it, but like, it was weird, it is quirky, it makes you feel uncomfy things. And this book basically talks about male-male relationships, sexuality. I think this also dives into addiction as well. Yeah, I think I tried to read William S. Burroughs' book Naked Lunch. I think that's the one I tried to read, and I was like, what is happening? William S. Burroughs is an author whose, again, name is just kind of so familiar to me, and I hear all the time, and when I see it I recognize it, but I don't recognize the actual literature, and I can't put 2 and 2 together of like, William S. Burroughs, oh yes, this book, I enjoyed it, so I want to have an opinion on it. His name is so synonymous with famous texts, but I have yet to experience it fully, so that is Queer. The next 2 books were found at the 25-cent library book sale, and yeah, let's just get into it. This one is Some of My Lives by Rosamond Bernier. I never heard the name Rosamond. Is it Bernier? Bernier or Bernier? Apparently she had quite a few relationships, friendships, acquaintanceships with a lot of famous artists, including Pablo Picasso, Henri Matisse, Karl Lagerfeld, all of these famous artists, and she just describes it in this book of all of the people that she's met, and wow, yeah, we got some old photos there as well. So this is a literary scrapbook from an extraordinary array of writings, ranging from scholarly articles for American publications to her many contributions to the art journal Le Ciel, which she co-founded in 1955. So this is a multifaceted self-portrait of a life informed and surrounded by the arts. This just sounds like such an incredible life, an incredible story of this woman that I have never heard of, and I am just so excited to get into this. I absolutely love memoirs. This is going to be a great place to actually understand who she is and why she had so many friends or relationships with very famous historical figures. But yeah, I am really looking forward to this one. The next book is Trains and Lovers by Alexander McCall Smith. Another large print book. We love to see it. And this book just called to me because of its quaint feelings. It just kind of gives me this like comfort feeling of a time and a place and an ambiance and all of that. Basically, it follows this, I believe it's just a couple or two couples who go on a train. They're going to a destination, but throughout it, they just converse about relationships. And it talks about how people meet strangers on trains and become entangled in each other's lives for a brief moment and then never to be seen again. This is something that I can definitely relate to. When I lived in Canada, I would travel a lot by train just to get back to the US border. And when I did that, I would sit next to really fascinating, amazing people, and we would talk the entire time. Obviously pre-COVID, when you could sit next to someone, have a full conversation. And it was just a wonderful experience. I don't remember their names, but I so vividly remember the conversations we had and the feelings I got when I left the train of humanity, of connections, and realizing once you disembark from that train, they still have lives and you're going to your own life. Yeah, I don't know. It's just a very profound feeling. Also, another sticker, library sticker I couldn't get off. Maybe one day I will, but for now, like, it's so bad. Yeah, it's a lot of like romantic relationships. So in this, there are gay and straight relationships. There's people from kind of all over the world who meet on this one train. I am really excited for this one. I feel like it would just be kind of a comfort read, but we shall see. I'm really looking forward to this one. And the last book that we have, friends, is from my dad's bookshelves again. Woman in the Dark by Dashiell Hammett. So despite how short it is, it does seem like it's just filled with so much suspense, and this author, I don't know much about him, but apparently he was kind of like the father of American thrillers, mystery, suspense. This was originally published in 1933, and it follows this woman who just shows up and is completely frightened for her life and fearful, and these people try and help her and figure out what's going on, who done it, what's happening. But despite how short it is, I feel like this is going to be kind of like a film noir almost, of this like mystery suspense. I don't know much about it at all, but I'm really looking forward to it. So that is the last book here. This stack seems very unstable. There we go. Well, that is it, my friends. That is my giant haul. All of these seem so incredibly fascinating and riveting and important, all in their own independent kind of ways. And I'm so excited to get to them and then read them and then tell you about them, my thoughts on them. Have you read any of these books? Would you recommend them? Are there any books on here that really caught your eye that you want to read? If so, let me know. I am so happy to chat with you all down in the comments about books and sharing what we found. What are some books that you found recently that you had never heard of, or you've been wanting for a long time and finally got your hands on? I would love to hear. I obviously have some reading to do, so I am gonna put these back on my ye old shelves. Thank you so much for joining me, my friends. I hope you enjoy some wonderful reading recommendations, get inspired to pick up a good book. Stay cozy, my friends. Bye!